At 10:47 p.m., the lights in my private hospital room flickered twice before a woman in a dark maintenance uniform stepped inside and quietly closed the door behind her. And when she pulled down her mask, I recognized her as Detective Nora Bennett, the investigator who had questioned me after my accident and now looked frightened enough to make my heart race. "Mrs. Callahan, I need you to listen carefully," she whispered, placing a small recorder beneath my blanket, "because someone inside this hospital has been paid to make sure you never testify about what you discovered." Name is Margaret Callahan. I was 63 years old, and until 3 days earlier I had believed my 31-year marriage to Victor Callahan was simply complicated rather than dangerous. Because we had built a respected construction company together, raised our son and daughter, donated generously to local charities, and appeared in every photograph like the definition of a successful American family. That illusion shattered on a rain-soaked evening outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, when my SUV suddenly lost control on a familiar mountain road, crossed the center line, smashed through a wooden barrier, and landed against a cluster of trees while I fought desperately to understand why the steering and brakes had both seemed to fail at once. Victor arrived at the hospital before my children did, wearing a perfectly pressed coat and telling everyone that I had been exhausted for weeks and probably made a terrible mistake behind the wheel. But while doctors treated my fractured collarbone and several deep bruises, I kept remembering one strange detail that made no sense. Immediately before the crash, I had heard a sharp metallic click beneath the dashboard and smelled hot plastic, a detail I mentioned to Detective Bennett before Victor entered the room and immediately interrupted with a concerned smile. "She's confused," he told the detective gently, squeezing my hand while staring directly into my eyes. "The medication is making her imagine things." For years, Victor had dismissed my instincts as anxiety, yet those instincts were exactly what had helped me discover that nearly $9 million had disappeared from Callahan Infrastructure through fake equipment leases, inflated invoices, and a chain of tiny companies that existed only on paper. And when I traced the final payments, I found something far more disturbing than ordinary corporate theft. The money eventually reached an investment account controlled by Victor's longtime friend and business partner, Graham Pike. I confronted Victor privately 2 weeks before the crash, expecting anger or an explanation, but instead he poured himself a glass of whiskey, stared through the kitchen window, and said, "Margaret, some doors are better left closed," before adding in a voice colder than I had ever heard, "You have no idea how many people depend on you staying quiet." The following morning, I secretly contacted my longtime attorney, Samuel Reed, and instructed him to create a protected evidence archive containing bank statements, company ledgers, property records, encrypted emails, and copies of every suspicious transaction I had uncovered. But Samuel warned me that we needed something stronger than financial evidence, because Victor could simply claim I had misunderstood legitimate business arrangements. I therefore placed a tiny encrypted recorder in my study and began documenting conversations. And 3 days before the crash, I captured Victor arguing with Graham about an upcoming shareholders' meeting, where Graham said, "If she votes against us, everything collapses," and Victor answered, "Then she won't be voting." 11:03 p.m., Detective Bennett told me the most frightening part of the story. Hospital security footage showed an unidentified man entering the building using credentials assigned to a maintenance employee who had been on vacation for 6 days. And 20 minutes later, that same access card had been used near the intensive care wing where my room was located. Before she could explain further, my daughter Lillian appeared at the door with rain dripping from her coat, a bruised wrist, and my missing laptop tucked tightly beneath her arm, and she whispered, "Mom, Dad knows we found the files." Lillian had always been the child Victor considered easiest to control, but that night she told me something that changed everything. After hearing about my crash, she had gone to Victor's private office because she suspected he was hiding something, and inside a locked cabinet she discovered a folder containing photographs of my SUV, a repair estimate for components that had supposedly never been damaged, and a handwritten note listing the exact date and time of my planned medical decline. She also found a second document showing that Victor had recently approached a physician about declaring me mentally incompetent, which would have allowed him to control my company shares, access certain financial accounts, and persuade a judge that any accusations I made were the confused accusations of an unstable woman. Detective Bennett immediately arranged for my evidence archive to be transferred to a federal financial crimes team. But before we could finish, the hospital corridor outside my room went silent, and a man wearing a delivery uniform slowly pushed a cart toward my door while pretending to check the room numbers. Lillian recognized him from a photograph inside Victor's office, and Bennett reacted instantly, switching off the lights and moving me away from the bed just as the man tried the handle, after which security officers intercepted him at the nurses' station and discovered a forged identity card, a stolen access badge, and a handwritten list containing my room number and the names of 2 hospital employees. The arrested man eventually identified himself as Derek Sloan, a former security consultant who admitted Graham had hired him to monitor me, but he insisted that he had not been instructed to hurt me and claimed Victor had repeatedly asked whether I was still capable of talking. That statement gave investigators enough justification to obtain emergency warrants, and within hours they searched Victor's office, Graham's warehouse, and a private storage unit where they discovered shredded contracts, backup hard drives, altered vehicle maintenance records, and boxes of documents connected to the missing company funds. While Samuel simultaneously revealed that the trust documents he had prepared before my accident would prevent Victor from taking control of my personal assets if criminal conduct were established. 2 weeks later, I walked into an emergency shareholders meeting wearing a shoulder brace and carrying a cane, and Victor's expression changed from disbelief to fury when he realized I was not only alive, but sitting at the head of the conference table with Detective Bennett, Samuel, the company auditor, and representatives from the Financial Crimes Division behind me. "You were supposed to be recovering," Victor whispered, and I answered, "I am recovering, Victor. I simply decided I would recover without you," before Samuel placed the evidence archive on the screen and played the recording from the night Victor had discussed preventing me from voting. The meeting ended with Victor suspended from his executive position, Graham taken into custody for financial crimes, and an independent forensic investigation launched into every major Callahan Infrastructure account. But the greatest surprise came 3 months later when auditors discovered that the company was far healthier than Victor had claimed, and that millions of dollars had been hidden from the board to make his theft appear smaller than it really was. By the following spring, Victor accepted a plea agreement after prosecutors presented evidence connecting him to the financial scheme and the attempted interference with my recovery, while Graham faced separate charges, and I sold the mansion where so many years of my marriage had been spent pretending everything was fine. A year later, Lillian and I stood together on the porch of a modest lakeside home in western New York, watching the evening sun disappear behind the trees while the company operated under independent leadership, and a portion of the recovered money supported a foundation helping older adults protect themselves from financial exploitation. I sometimes thought about the woman I had been before the crash, the woman who believed loyalty meant enduring silence, and I finally understood that surviving Victor had never been about destroying him, because the greatest victory was waking up every morning knowing that my life, my choices, and my future finally belonged entirely to me. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.